Welcome, everyone, to the Songwriters on Process podcast. My name is Benno Papari, and on this podcast, I take a deep dive into the writing process behind some of the world's best songwriters. By way of background, I am a former English professor. I have a PhD in English language and literature, and I'm a writer myself. So this is a conversation about writing between two writers. My goal has always been to treat songwriters the same way that we treat prose writers, just as writers, plain and simple. So that's all we focus on. I don't care about tour stories, favorite bands, how bands get their name, favorite foods, anything like that. This is, again, a deep dive into the songwriting process with some of the world's best songwriters. And with that, let's get into today's episode. And today on the pod, the legendary, iconic, how many superlatives do I need? Lucinda Williams. Williams' new album is called World's Gone Wrong. We spent a lot of this conversation talking about writing prep, the things we do to prepare ourselves to write. And I love this quote. I wrote this down. This is what she told me. I'm obsessed with paper. I could spend hours in an office supply store. Did you ever think you'd hear that from Lucinda Williams? Or a stationery store? Anything with cards, envelopes, pads, postcards, pens, she enjoys. We also talked about when we write after an event happens. I talk a lot with songwriters about the immediacy, whether you wait or if you write immediately after that thing. As she said, I don't want to write in the middle of a hurricane. I need to take a step back and gain perspective. And we talk also, and this is a really interesting part of this, about the emotional state we need to be in when we write. And she said, I might want to write about something sad and dark, but I have to have a sense of well-being to be able to write about that sad, dark thing. I can't write when I'm depressed. I have to feel content to be in the mood to write something dark. I can't be in that dark mood to write about it. And how interesting is that, right? That she can write about dark things, but she has to be happy to write about those things. That she can't write when she's in that funk. And I can understand that. Stick around for a great story she tells about meeting the great Flannery O'Connor. You know, Lucinda Williams' father, Miller Williams, was a fantastic poet. And we talked about her father's influence as a poet on Lucinda Williams' songwriting. I assigned her father's poetry when I was an English professor. So I really enjoyed talking to Williams about the influence her father had, but also specifically about her father's use of imagery in his poems. So much here. You don't want to listen to me talk. You want to listen to Lucinda Williams, the master, the icon, talk about her songwriting process. Again, the new album is called World's Gone Wrong. Here is my interview with Lucinda Williams. So as a songwriter, do you think it's important to create every day?
I don't know. It's kind of a hard question because I know what most people say, and then I know what the reality is. You know, the majority of songwriters or other writers I've talked to will say that it's good to just write anything every day. You know, just for the exercise, getting your brain going. And I think that's what Nicky Davidoff was saying when he said to fill up notebooks every night or over time fill up several notebooks. I think that was what he was basically saying, was just to write. Even if it's just I went to the grocery store today and bought bananas and apples, you know. So, but on the other hand, the reality is for me that I have to be in the mood. My head's got to be in a certain space. I've got to have a physical certain space too to get in the mood, you know. Like I have to be completely alone, ideally. On the other hand, sometimes I can write while I'm riding in the back seat of a car, or if I'm in a bar sitting on a bar stool. And I've been known to write on cocktail napkins at bars, you know. 'cause I just get that urge, or I might hear something somebody says, and I'll think, "Oh, wow, that's a really good line. I need to get write it down so I don't forget it."
Okay, so here's my follow-up to that. Because my fear always, and I'm the same way, I feel like I have to be in a certain space. But my
Yeah.
fear with that, I mean, a certain space physically and emotionally. But
Mhm.
my fear with that is that it makes me so rigid that it prevents me from being spontaneous. If I feel
Right.
like, oh, I've got to be in that room, I have to be. So
Yeah.
do you ever think about that? Is that ever something that you think, gosh, I really wish I could be more flexible?
Yeah, definitely, but I think I have become more flexible, though, over time, like in the examples I just expressed, being in a bar, writing on a cocktail napkin so I started feeling like since I was doing those sorts of things that it was all gonna be okay. I can still be spontaneous and, that I don't have to have necessarily have to have the perfect surroundings. I think those that comes in more for me when after, if I've got enough lyrics and it's time to start creating a melody, you know, then I really wanna be in a certain private kind of space and vibe and everything. When I'm starting to finish to really make the song come to life.
So was there when you started writing on the cocktail napkins? Because I saw an interview with you when you brought out I think it was the CBS interview. You brought out the cocktail napkins. Um, so when you started doing that, was it because you thought, you know what, I have to be more flexible, or was it spontaneous and then you thought, wow, I can actually do this? I'm curious which came first.
Yeah, it was just the spontaneity of the urge to write something down that I heard somebody say or something or I thought of. Yeah.
The writer Dorothy Parker has a great quote. She said, "I hate writing, but I love having written."
Wow. That's a kind
And
of that's sort of heavy. That's
it it is heavy, but I'm the same way. I always I love having written, but I don't. I'll be honest. I don't sit there and I think to myself, "Wow, I'm enjoying this process." I always love the
right.
product. So, how often is that happening? I mean, when are you realistically? Is that when you're in those moments? It's just got to be euphoria, right? When you're actually in that
Yeah.
groove.
When I'm in that space and it's flowing, the words are flowing and I'm coming up with great rhymes and it's all making and I know something's gonna happen with this, that it's gonna be a good song and somebody's gonna hear it and really like it and just all those things come together, yeah. There's nothing quite like that feeling.
I want to get back to the journaling because we had talked about this already, but you didn't do any journaling until you started writing the book. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I never did I used to keep a diary when I was a teenager. That's when I was really into that, into journaling, and then over time, I just, you know, wasn't doing it anymore. But the book, a lot of people say, "Well, you don't need to keep a journal." My father actually said this once because I was putting pressure on myself to keep a journal, because everybody's saying, "Oh, you should keep a journal, you should keep a journal," and I just wasn't into it really. And then my dad said, "You don't need to worry about that. You're a songwriter. That's what you do. You are journaling in a sense, you know."
I'm
Um,
curious, but when you were doing the journal writing for the book, do you think that affected your songwriting process at all? Were you getting ideas as you were journaling? Because I do hear a lot of songwriters who journal, and some of them use them as a way completely separate from the songwriting. Others
yeah,
say, as they're journaling, it's, oh, this gives me a song idea. So, did that ever
right.
happen?
I think probably it did. I can't remember. I can't recall, specific instances or examples, but it probably did. A lot of stuff was creeping into my subconscious, while I was writing the book.
All right, let me ask you about the ritual. Is there, because you mentioned being in that ideal emotion, is there an ideal emotion when you tend to get your best writing done? Can you write at the extremes of emotion, or do you need to be centered? I mean, some people say they can write from a place of euphoria or sadness. Others just find that that's too debilitating. So, is
Yeah.
there an ideal emotion?
Um, well, I don't know if there's an ideal one for me at least, but what I've experienced has been more, I'll go through something and have an experience that's really intense, whether it's happy or sad or whatever it is. I don't really write when I'm in the middle of that, in the hurricane. I write when after I step back from it and then I look at it. I can get a perspective, and that's when I write more. So when people say, they can't write unless they're bummed out or sad or whatever, that's kind of I don't know, I think a little bit of a myth because I mean, the last thing I want to do when I'm really bummed out and upset and mad or sad is write. I don't want to do a fucking thing, you know. I want to sit on the couch and watch TV for 2 hours. I want to escape usually.
Now, I want to ask you about the distance because I've got some quote here. I have all these quotes here by some of my favorite quotes by writers. And on one hand, Hemingway said that um, he needed distance to be able to write about something. He could never write about Paris when he was in Paris. He needed
Right.
distance. William
That's
Burroughs said there is only one thing a writer can write about, what is in front of his senses at the moment of writing. So there's those opposites. But if I'm hearing you, you need that distance, right?
yeah, I need that distance. I'm just trying to think what you said that William Burroughs said. He said it was something about the moment of writing. So wasn't he talking about I mean, it sounds like he was talking about you have to be in the thing. I would say mine would be more right after it.
Because some people need that time maybe to literally take a breath and say, it's too intense. I need to be able to process it. Other people
Right.
use that writing to process.
Yeah. I use the writing to process it, but I mean, some things are so hard to deal with that they take you that long to process.
With the distance, I like what I do is I need the immediacy, but then I set it aside when I'm done, and then I go back to it to kind of say, that I need that perspective after, but I do need to be in the moment to have to write about something.
Right, of course, you wanna be close as you can get to it, but you still need a little bit of, I mean, it's just what I was saying about if I'm knee deep in it, it's just, it's like, oh, I know what I was gonna say. It's like what you were saying about you quoted, Dorothy Parker, I think it was, and
Yeah,
she said, "I love the having written, but I don't like writing. I don't
yeah.
enjoy it." That's what I was basically saying was a similar thing, that when I'm going through something really, really hard, like somebody I was close to died, you know, I mean, I don't go, "Oh, wow, I can't wait to get home and sit and write a song about this," I mean, I don't feel like doing that. I feel like I wanna do something, just be really non, you know, lazy and sit on the couch and watch a B movie or something. I don't wanna have my brain is exhausted. I don't wanna have to think anymore.
Is there a time when you know then when you're ready to write about it? I don't know the answer to that, but
I
is
know,
there a
yeah. That's
I,
just one of those natural spontaneous urges that comes up for me. It is hard to explain. It's so hard to explain writing and all of that, because so much of it is so ethereal. It's not like getting up and going to a 9 to 5 job every day. although in places like Nashville, songwriting has become like a 9 to 5 job for some people. They make appointments and go to these publishing company buildings and write with someone and then get done with that and have another appointment in the afternoon with somebody else. And, you know,
But I think it's important, at least for me, it's important to, and I agree with you 100% that I don't want to delve into the mystery of it too much. Um, but I do feel like I need to know what sets me up for success the most. Um,
you're trying to
right.
figure all this out.
Well, okay. So, for example, is a chair like for me? I never write and revise in the same chair. If I write in this chair, I'm going to write in another. I'm going to revise in another
Yeah,
chair.
I understand. I get it. I do. I totally get it, all that. Like, I find, of course, I travel a lot and I'm in different buildings, hotels, and different, you know, offices or whatever. Occasionally, I'll walk in a room and I'll think, "Oh, wow, this is a great songwriting room." And it might have something to do with the way the light filters in through a certain window, and I feel this safe feeling, and, like, I could get into being in here.
Now, I want to ask you about the very specific writing. So you said you never learned to type. Now, I could do an entire website dedicated to the loyalty that songwriters have to color of ink, brand of
Yes,
pen, and
I
type of
have
paper.
that. I have
Okay, so
that.
let's hear it.
It's called Precise V5,
I love those.
right? Wow, you're the only other person I've met who knows about them.
I love those.
Except
Now,
a black this is blue, and I would use black.
oh, you're a black ink person. Okay.
Yeah, black Precise V5 fine. They have extra fine and fine. When I'm
And what about
songwriting, I would use fine. I would just use the fine. I like it to be a little thick, but not too thick. That's what like about these is it's just the right, it's not too thin of a line, when you're writing.
I had Jerry Harrison of the
Um,
Talking Heads on, and he told me that it has to be a felt tip pen because he loves the sensation of the scraping on the page.
I
Um,
love them. He had that band that split off from Talking Heads that he and his wife
yeah, Tom
did.
Tom Club, right?
Yeah, I love them. I love Talking Heads. I always loved them.
So, how did you discover that that pen was was the one?
Just trying different ones 'cause, I'm obsessed with pens and paper. I mean, I could spend hours in a office supply store or, a stationery store, any place that has cards, greeting cards, postcards, pads of paper, pens, all different colors, you know, all of that stuff.
So, what about paper? Is there a type of color or notebook type that you like more
Um,
than others?
I usually just use kind of what's available, which is usually, if I'm lucky, there might be a legal pad available. That's what my dad used to write on. He was very consistent about, like, what he wrote on, and he had a favorite pen too, felt tip. And he wrote on the legal pads, not the letter lengths, but the actual real legal pads, or he would type. Yeah.
Now, when you're crossing, so you're writing those lyrics. When you have a word that you want that you don't like, do you? I know this is going to sound specific, but this is a
That's
peculiarity of
okay.
people. Do you cross out the word, or do you scribble over it so that you can't see it again?
No, I cross it out. I don't like the scribbling thing. That
S-
bugs me. It bothers me when people do that, actually, because 'cause I've seen people do that, like, they go, "Ugh." I don't like that. It creates chaos, kind of. you
Ooh, I
know?
like it. Ah, you don't like that chaos on the page.
No, I just draw a line through it and, yeah, I try to keep things from getting to that chaotic point on the page where it's, like you can barely make sense of it.
Also, I feel like drawing one line through is a balance because you're not erasing because I don't want to erase because I
No,
need that line
yeah,
later again, but crossing out, you
right,
can still read it.
exactly. Yeah, right. And
So
at some point, I get another fresh page and I'll just write the new version of, the line or lines,
but
so
you never
I keep editing and keep coming up with the revised versions.
let me ask I want to talk about revision because I interviewed a couple months ago the poet Paul Muldoon. And Paul
Okay.
Muldoon is iconic poet, but he also actually has a side project he does for fun as a songwriter. Um, and he told me something that really surprised me, although it made sense afterwards. He said that when he writes poetry, he cannot write line two until line one is perfect. So he edits line by
Oh
line.
my god. Wow.
Right. And that was, he said, most people will find that to be insane. But now I understand that because with poetry, that line two is not going to work until line one is perfect because line two depends on line one, line three
Yeah.
depends on line two. Um, I don't write that way at all, but I found that to be very unique that he cannot move on until
Yeah,
the line. Yeah. So
that
how do
is.
what are your thoughts on that? Do you write like that at all, or do you just get everything out there and then revise?
Yeah, I would feel that somewhat stifling. I like to write actually, in a large part, I do sort of stream of consciousness writing sometimes. It depends on the mood, but just to get me, it's like trying to get an engine warmed up, and I don't worry about mistakes or the grammar or anything. I just write, let it just whatever comes out of my head, I just write it down, and then I go back and look at it and see if I can make sense out of that. And I do like to edit. I like to go back and fix and edit and mold and make it, like working with clay almost, you know.
So you get I'm the same way. I always would assign the essay when I was a professor, the essay Shitty First Drafts by Anne Lamott. And that was her whole premise is the first draft is supposed to be shitty. Uh,
Right. Yeah. I actually I've found that I love editing.
really?
Yeah, I actually like it.
What do you like about it? I don't hear that very often.
Well, I don't know. I guess it's maybe part of my OCD thing where I like to make everything real, orderly and and I like to see something that's real rough and raw become something wonderful and beautiful, you know. And that, in fact, I've been doing a lot of writing with my husband and manager, Tom Overby. And that's how we have a whole system where he'll write some initial lyrics and bring them to me. I look at them and do some editing, and then I come up with the melody and the cadence and the tempo and all of that. And we've come up with some good songs that way, actually.
I think what we're getting at here is the I always tell writers that or people who want to be writers that the thinking process is chaotic in a good way. It's not linear.
Absolutely.
We don't think, we don't say this.
Yes.
I'm going to think about this, then I'm going to think about this. And I need to be able to mirror the chaos in the brain on the page, which is why I'm the
Right.
same way you are. Um,
Right.
and part of it is that it's an anxiety that if I don't get it down immediately, I'm going to forget it. So when
Yeah.
if I'm typing something and our kids walk by, they're mystified that I have a job because it's nothing but blue lines from Microsoft Word because I don't care about spelling or punctuation or
Right.
anything in that initial draft.
Right, and you shouldn't because it gets in the way of the creativity, the creative process. Yeah, absolutely. People don't talk about this enough probably, you know?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Like,
Do you
I don't know how other songwriters handle that or do that or anything because we don't sit down. I don't have songwriter friends where we sit around and talk about writing, you know, because
That's why I
it's
started the
so
podcast.
private. It's such a private thing, which is why I mean, the idea of that's why I'm surprised that I'm have been doing so well writing with Tom because I always kind of shied away from the co-writing experience, you know,
Because
because
it's private.
it's so personal for me. Yeah,
One more thing about the ritual. So, is there an ideal time of day, things you have to have with you, favorite room, favorite chair, things like that?
yeah. It seems no matter where I've lived, I inevitably end up at the kitchen table, you know, and I mean, even when I have an office set up with the desk and everything, I end up at the kitchen table. Just something about it. And I like to actually write when I first get up. I mean, I'm not an early riser, but whatever time I get up is that's morning for me. I don't care if it's 2 or 3 in the afternoon. You know, people joke about that all the time with me. "Oh, you're just getting up, ha, ha, ha." You know? I was making myself a cup of coffee one day, and a friend of ours came by the house, and he saw me pouring the coffee, and he goes, "You're having coffee now?" Because it was, like, 5 in the afternoon or something, and I hadn't been up that long. And I said, "Yeah, I'm having coffee now. You got a problem with that?" And he goes, "Well, if I had coffee now, I would be up all night long, and I wouldn't be able to go to sleep." And I was kinda like, "Right, that's the point." You know, I'm a night owl, so I don't mind and I was weaned on coffee. When I was a kid growing up in the South in Louisiana, we'd go over to our grandparents' house, my mother's parents, and they'd be drinking coffee 10 o'clock at night. It wasn't a big deal back then. People just drank coffee all the time. They didn't think about, "Oh, it's got so much caffeine." And they gave the kids what they called coffee milk, which was really strong coffee with a lot of milk and sugar. And we loved it. It was like drinking hot chocolate kind of. And there was never any comment about, "Oh my god, she's a little kid, you're gonna give her all these caffeine and everything." Nobody cared.
So, not to get to
That was off the subject.
no, it's not at all. Not at all. Here's
Okay.
why. Because now I'm wondering if that coffee now, when you go to pour that coffee, it gives you that sense of comfort that you
It
can start
does.
to write. I see a
Yes.
total connection there.
It absolutely 100%.
I
That's
don't
the
know that
first
it's the
thing I do.
caffeine.
It's not the caffeine, you know, it's just I mean, because 'cause I'll drink decaf. I don't really care. I just want that taste and that feeling of, you know, comfort.
Yeah, right, and that gets
Yeah.
you it's what we're talking about. It gets you in that
It in
mood,
that
primed,
space.
ready to write.
Right, exactly. And, of course, I like to be dressed comfortably.
That's interesting, though, the
But
kitchen table,
yeah.
because I have heard that John Darnielle of the Mountain Goats told me that he wrote an entire album at the kitchen table because he said that's where the mojo was. Um,
Right.
but
Yeah.
that's but I don't like is I wonder if that's a space thing. You've got all that space around you because there's got to
Yeah.
be more comfortable chairs in your house for you to write in, right?
Yeah, like the couch or something, but then that's too comfortable and you end up just wanting to, you know, take a nap or something. And
I
that's the
love
other
it.
thing, the chair is important because it needs to be comfortable, but not too comfortable, you know, because you wanna be upright, sitting up. You don't wanna be lean and if I lean back too much in certain chairs, I get up and my back is killing me, you know, so but I was gonna say also that was interesting. He said he wrote an entire album at the kitchen table because I did sort of this experience a similar thing, when I was going through a really healthy, good songwriting phase. We were living in LA in a different house, and I got into this, day after day routine thing of getting up, sitting, going to the kitchen table, and I was coming up with all these great songs, and I would record them on one of those Zoom recorder things. And so the quality was amazing. After would record the song, I'd go give it to Tom. He would listen to it, and then I would wait for him to come tell me what he thought, and I could tell by the look on his face, if he liked it or not. And then he would burn them on a CD, and they would sound so amazing. It was like instant gratification, doing it that way. And it was so productive and positive. We ended up putting those out the way they were as bonus tracks on the album, and we called them the kitchen tapes.
Okay, Agatha Christie. This is the one quote that I always give songwriters. Agatha Christie once said, the best time to write a book is when you're doing the dishes. So the
Uh-huh.
idea that the eureka moments happen when our brains are engaged in unconscious activities. So I hear people say
Mhm.
they get ideas while they're mowing the lawn, folding laundry, vacuuming.
Driving.
Yeah, driving. So how
Yeah.
often does that happen to you? Because I think again, that's why they say we get our best ideas in the shower, because when your brain is turned off for
Yeah.
those activities. So how often does that happen?
Quite a bit. I've noticed it more and more lately. I mean, once I start, I kind of get things going started just a little bit, then the floodgates at some point open up, and, you know, all this stuff starts coming out. So yeah, the shower is a great. I use it to warm my voice up. Like if I have to go in the studio later that day, I do that. I have these exercises I do for my vocal cords. And sometimes when I'm doing that, like I'll start, you know, working on a song in the shower. Usually something I've already kind of started and I'm trying to get a melody for or something. But yeah, driving is a big one because the rhythm of kind of a that I wrote Joy like that way. My song Joy, you took my
Yeah.
joy, I want it back. That was a driving thing. You took my joy, I want it back. Kind of you sort of can feel the
Yeah.
get the cadence of the song kind of on the steering wheel. And I mean, I wasn't going like this on the steering wheel, but just that the vibe and feel of driving down the road.
Yeah, and it's that, but see, to me, that when you say that, that's almost sounds like there's a rhythm. Maybe there was something up a bump. Didn't they say the Bee Gees' Jive Talking was over a covered bridge? That ba
Really?
bump bum. Yeah, that's what I'd heard.
Wow.
Um, but yeah, I think there's two things here. That can be some kind of cadence in maybe the tires that you're not
Yeah,
aware of, but
right.
it's happening. And then there's just the mind is a blank slate. I don't know the answer. I don't want to know the answer. And I think the danger is again when you put yourself in that situation to do it. Like if you say I'm going to go driving to get a eureka moment, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. No. Right. Yeah, you can't it's not like a factory. You can't just push a button and it all comes out perfectly. I mean, again, that's kind of the a lot of country songs are written like that now, like, set up an appointment, get your guitar, drive over to the office on Music Row, sit down in a room that's all ready with pens and pads of paper and stuff, and write. "Okay, go." Boom. I mean,
Yeah.
they do write songs like that, but I don't think they're very good songs,
Yeah.
you know? Therein lies the problem. You're not hearing songs like Merle Haggard sang, "Mama Tried" and stuff like that, That doesn't sound like a co-write to me. That sounds like he wrote it by himself.
Now, for me, when I find that I'm stuck, there's nothing that breaks me out of a slump more than a good walk, or some
Yep.
kind of movement. So
Yeah.
does
Endorphin.
that yeah, so do you find that movement, and that's separate from the
Yeah.
vacuuming I talked about, but walking, self-locomotion, not driving, but where you're moving your limbs, do you
Yeah.
find that that's a good place to kind of break free of
Yes. And
a
I
rut?
and it makes me feel better because I'm doing something good for myself. Like the irony of this is I might get inspired by something really sad and dark, but I have to have a sense of well-being in order to sit down and write about that sad, dark thing. Like if I'm really depressed, I can't write when I'm depressed. I don't want to write. That's what I was saying before. You know, I might want to go out with some friends or something and go hear a band and have drink some wine and, kick my heels up and that kind of thing. You know, like I have to feel content and somewhat, I was trying to think of a word instead of happy, but just some kind of contentment within myself to be in the mood to write about something dark. I can't be in that dark moment and do it. I mean, I shouldn't say can't, but that's not what I do usually.
Back to the movement, one follow-up to that is, are there things that if you find that you're working on a song and you just have reached an impasse and you just are there things that you do you step away? Are there tricks that you have to kind of break free from that rut if you find that you're at an impasse?
That was always a hard one. Think I had to grow to learn how to deal with that. I remember talking to a therapist about it once, and she said, some people call them dry spells, like, well, that's not exactly what you were talking about, but when I get to that impasse point, I've learned how to just bypass it. I just go, okay, that's it for today. I'll get back to it tomorrow. And I just have that faith and trust that it's going to happen.
The writer Anthony Doerr wrote a book called All the Light We Cannot See, won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction about 10 years ago. And I asked him about writer's block, and he said something I'll never forget. He said, I don't believe in writer's block. He said, writer's block is a failure of courage.
Wow. Oh, God.
Well, his whole thing
Huh.
is don't be afraid to write the bad stuff.
Exactly. Which goes back to what we were talking about before. I know I hear a lot of times, and it really bothers me and bugs me. Sometimes I'll hear a singer songwriter talking about, I don't know, I'm having trouble finding stuff to write about. I just can't seem to find the inspiration. And that's another thing I grew into over the years as I got older and more experienced. I realized, God, it's everywhere. There's no lack of inspiration. I mean, I think I remember finding out that, Bob Dylan would read a story in the newspaper about something and he would write a song about it. Of course, he was an avid reader, which I think also helps with ideas, you know. Um, but I don't know. It's all about your perspective and how you view the world.
I'm a big fan of your father's poetry.
Oh,
I
thanks.
his book, when I was an English professor, I assigned his book, How Does a Poem Mean, to my students.
Oh,
So
wow.
so
Thank
um
you. That's
And
great.
here's what's interesting. So his poem for a girl I know about to be for a girl I know about to become a woman. There's a couple of um images in there that I thought were so interesting, and he has radar detector and cellular phone in that poem, and those are not only unpoetic images, but they're unpoetic sounds. I mean,
Yeah.
radar detector,
Yeah.
cellular phone. There's
Right.
nothing.
They're not romantic. It's not
No,
romantic language.
no, but
Yeah.
yet he makes it work. And I had a poetry professor in college who talked about this, and he had in one of his poems, he had the word. He said something. The line was something like, "There's no phrase lovelier than garage door," and it's an unpoetic image, but it's a poetic
Right.
sound. So that's a long way of saying when you're writing, how much are you thinking about that tension? uh, I guess the poetic images or
Yeah.
unpoetic images and unpoetic sounds.
All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm so glad you brought this up because a lot of times when Tom will give me lyrics that he's been working on for a song, I'll see those words like that or those phrases, and I won't really like them, you know? And I started wondering, like, is this a male thing? You know, um, because these are not poetic sounding words and lines, you know? And I've actually mentioned that to him before. Usually he'll say, "Yeah, I know, but that was all I could think of at the time," or something, you know? But that when I'm editing his lyrics, that's what I bump into that a lot and try to rephrase it a different way, you know? But
Yeah,
that's where the talent comes in, I guess.
right. Um, because again, it's not just, a phrase like radar detector is not even poetic, and it's about as unpoetic of an image and I can possibly
I
imagine.
know. And, I'm so glad you brought this up for another reason too, because I noticed that in my dad's writing. Because I was rereading some of his poems the other day,
So was I.
and
Yep.
right, and I realized, for one thing, I realized how great he was, you know, but I also realized how many times he used those kinds of lines in poems that I wouldn't have probably used, you know, but
That's why he's a
you're
poet.
so exactly, but like you said, they also worked. He made them work. You know, he balances it out with these incredibly poetic images, like one of the poems I was reading was something about he visits his mother when she's, you know, 90 something years old and she's preparing to die and she's real thin and frail looking. And he tries to describe that, how she looks. And he says something like, her bones are as how did he put it? Something about like she's the frame in a kite. And then he says she could be a kite, you know. And I thought, wow, that's it kind of surprised some of the lines surprised me in some of the poems. Like they just didn't feel very poetic.
Right, and I did notice that about
Uh,
his I agree 100% about his poetry, that a lot of it, but he makes it, but again, that's why he's a great poet and I'm
and
not, because he can use radar detector or cellular phone in a
right.
poem and make it beautiful.
I would never use cellular phone. That is just I wouldn't feel comfortable. It just turns me off to even think about that.
I wrote it down because it struck me so much.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I've never heard anyone ever point that out before. This is
Well,
you're a good teacher. This is educational,
but yeah, like I don't know that radar detector would work in a song. Um,
unless what would you'd have to try to rhyme with detector,
yeah. Um,
inflector, inspector.
but
Elvis
it's just
Costello could do it, I bet.
it's poetic. It's in a poem, And I think what strikes me about his poems is that those words are offset by more traditional poetic images. And
Right.
so when they're
That's
in
what I
those
was trying to
poems,
yeah.
yeah, they don't seem unnatural.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say before, but I couldn't remember the line that I was trying to quote. But there is a line in his poem "Compassion," which I turned into a song, which is a whole 'nother, um, project that I jumped into and really enjoyed, and that is the line in the Compassion poem where he says, "Who knows what wars are going on down there where the spirit meets the bone." That is just
Ooh,
absolutely love that. The imagery, the sound of it, the way it feels when you say it. I love where the spirit down there where the spirit meets the bone,
beautiful.
the deepest place you can go, you know?
It and
It's
I
so
just
good. It's
it
so
is.
God, it's good.
Last question. So I do find that songwriters, there's a very clear through line between songwriters who are great songwriters, who've been around for a long time, and those are the people that read the most. So I'd love to. Are you a genre person or an author person? So I'll tell you what I am. When
Yeah,
I finish a book, my first thought is I do not want to read something else by that writer. I want another voice in my head.
yeah.
So where do you stand on that?
I'm probably that way. I'm more of a genre person. I love autobiographies. I mean, who doesn't? You know, um, I like the book. I like the words in the book to flow along. I don't like to get all bogged down and, I don't like books that are supposed to be about someone that I'm really excited about reading, and then I start trying to get into it. It's too academic, you know. Those are the kind of writers who would, if they had been songwriters, they would probably use things like cellular phone, you know. I was reading a book about Emily Dickinson. I can't remember the author, but it was just I didn't enjoy it because it was just it was all factual and kind of academic and not really entertaining, you know. I've read a
Also,
I've read a lot of Stephen King because I'm a horror film fan and I just love his stories, but I love the way he writes also. It just gets right down to it.
he's a great writer.
Yeah, he is a great writer.
Well, I was going to say Emily Dickinson didn't have the most exciting life. I mean, if you want excitement, to read about the writers in Paris in the 1920s, right? You got to read those books.
That's what I've been reading lately is Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas, and
Oh, nice.
well, it's weird because the name of the book is The Autobiography of Gertrude Stein as seen through the eyes of Alice B. Toklas, so it's kind of because that's not really what it is. I mean, it talks about them it's not really an autobiography, it's just Alice B. Toklas writing about Gertrude and her hanging out in their apartment in Paris with all these just new burgeoning artists like Picasso and a bunch of those guys. They would all come over and drink wine and eat. And she talks about the pictures on the wall, which are works of art by these new young artists. And she refers to them as pictures. So I got fascinated with those two characters because when I was, coming up in the 60s, they were such among the hippie feminist women were always talking about Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas. And there was something about Alice B. Toklas brownies or something. Remember that? I don't know.
No.
I just remember hearing about Alice B. Toklas and pot brownies. Somehow that got connected with her.
I took a class in graduate school and I was getting my PhD, and the class was Americans in Paris in the 1920s. And we read that book and all those. It was all about that scene. Uh,
Yeah, it sounded so great. I wanted to be
yeah.
there. I always wished I could have been hanging out at that time.
So there's a great book that I'll get you the title somehow, but I read it. It came out in the past 10 years, and it's about Hemingway's writing process when he wrote The Sun Also Rises. Um,
Wow.
but it's not about it's about his time in Paris in the 20s, but it's literally about his whole process of writing that book.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because, Hemingway very deliberately, he was friends with F. Scott Fitzgerald, but hated F. Scott Fitzgerald's writing. And
Really?
he
Wow.
deliberately said, I'm going to write in a way that no one has done before. Like he created that style because he was so tired of what he was reading.
Right.
And and in the book, it's a great book. But it's all about that scene, but more specifically about Hemingway,
Yeah.
um, and just the backstory of him writing that book. And all the characters in The Sun Also Rises are friends of his. And after the book came out, they all disowned him because he
Right.
made them look so bad in the book.
Yeah,
Um,
there and people were like that back then, if you crossed them one time, that was it. Or if they didn't get invited to your soiree, you know, they would never speak again, you know?
right. So I think I interrupted you, but any other fiction writers? You mentioned Stephen King, but any other fiction writers that you're a
I
fan of?
I read some Anne Rice. I liked her books. Um, well, when I was a teenager, I discovered Southern Gothic writers like
Yeah.
Flannery O'Connor was my first and favorite and still is, and my dad knew her. She was he told me one time he told me one time she was his greatest teacher, and
Wow.
he would go visit her in Milledgeville, Georgia, which wasn't too far from Macon, where we were living for a while, and he took me with him one day when he went to visit Flannery. I got to tag along.
Tell me that story. How
Yeah,
old? Tell me,
I've
what was
told
that like?
that was I mean, I was very really young, like 6 or 7 maybe, and, but I like to think that I absorbed some of her mojo and all of that, you know. She raised peacocks, which I'm sure you've heard about,
Yeah.
lived in this big old farmhouse, kind of Civil War era type house, and she had a housekeeper who and now Flannery was one of these writers who would write religiously something every day between certain hours. And she wouldn't have company, she wouldn't do anything until she had been sitting at her desk for however long it was, So when we got there, the shades were drawn, the Venetian blinds, and her housekeeper came out and said, "Miss Flannery is working right now, but I'll come out and get you when she's ready for y'all." And my dad said, "Okay." So we sat on the front porch until the housekeeper came back out and said, "Okay, Miss Flannery will see you now." Very old Southern. And so my dad went in to talk to her, and they left me out in the yard to play with the peacocks. Apparently, I chased them around the yard, and then at some point we left. As soon as I came of age to be able to appreciate her writing, I started reading it and I just fell madly in love with her writing. I read everything she wrote. And then I got into some of the other ones like Eudora Welty and Carson McCullers, of course,
Mm,
you know. And then I tried to read Faulkner and I didn't like it. And
hmm.
I told my dad I felt this need to read him because any proper Southerner had to read William Faulkner, especially if you're a writer. It's just one of those things that like a rite of passage almost. But I just couldn't get into him. I didn't like his style. And so I told my dad, I said, "Dad, I'm trying to read Faulkner and I'm just not getting into it." And he said, "Honey, that's okay. Don't worry about it. William Faulkner was an asshole anyway."
And that's it for the latest episode of Songwriters on Process. You can find all of the old episodes on all major streaming platforms and probably some minor ones as well. You can also find them on the Songwriters on Process website. I started the site back in 2011, so that means there are hundreds upon hundreds of interviews with some of the world's best songwriters. So take a deep dive into some of those episodes. They are all great. Of course, I'm biased. Also, shameless plug. My book, Desolation, a Heavy Metal Memoir by Mark Morton with Benno Papari, that is me, is out now on Hachette Books and in all major bookstores. Mark is a good friend of mine. He is the guitarist in the metal band Lamb of God. And so we collaborated on his memoir. I'm biased, but that's a damn good book. Again, it is called Desolation, a Heavy Metal Memoir. And lastly, if you want to get in touch, go to the Songwriters on Process website. You can fill out a handy contact form and it'll get to me that way. You can also email me at ben@songwritersonprocess.com. I'm all ears. Send me your comments, your suggestions, your complaints, people you want me to interview. I get great suggestions all the time. I can't respond to all of the emails because I get a lot of them, but I do read all of them. And let me know your thoughts. If you have ideas for people you want me to interview, there's your chance. And with that, I am out. See you next time.